Okay, I think that's the sign that we get to start. Everybody have their headsets on, ready to go?
Yes.
Good, good, fantastic. Good, excellent. First of all, I'd like to thank the government of Finland for joining us for this. This is fantastic to be able to do this session. My name is Teresa Swinehart. I work with ICANN. And we are very much looking forward to this panel session, which will focus in on the WSIS process and where we are with regards to that. This does build on our discussion that we held at the last IGF in December 2024, and what has been and can be done between now and the upcoming December WSIS+20 related negotiations, and what matters to us leading up to that. Clearly, the decisions that are still to come could affect the internet governance aspects for the next decade. And we really need to look at what practical steps different communities can take between now and December and what their observations are from the past. So with that, I'd like to ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves. You'll see that we have a panel from the technical community, from government, civil society, and intergovernmental initiatives. And this will be an important observation from each of these sectors for the discussions. So if I could start with the panel to my right for the brief introductions.
Thank you so much. So my name is Yuping Chan. I lead digital engagements and partnerships at the United Nations Development Program.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jarno Surela. I'm Undersecretary of State for International Trade at the Finnish Foreign Ministry.
Hi, nice to see everyone again. Fiona Alexander. I'm a professor at American University in Washington, D.C.
I'm Chris Lindquist. I'm the President and CEO of ICANN.
I am Lessina Kone. I am the CEO and Director General of Smart Africa, a Pan-African organization based in Kigali.
Fantastic, very good. Thank you, everybody. Now, we have 4 sections to today's session in a limited amount of time, so we will go through each of them, and we do have a poll as well, so that'll add to the excitement. So on the first part that we really want to talk about is understanding WSIS+20 and what it is. It's in the 20-year review process at this point, and the commitments made between 2003 and 2005, and building on a more inclusive development-oriented information society. What would be very good to hear from the panelists is to start discussing the scope of that process. Who's involved, what's at stake, and how different communities can still contribute. So with that, question 1, I'll go over to Yuping. UNDP is one of the lead co-facilitators of the Geneva Action Plan. If you could just walk us through the mandate for WSIS+20, what deliverables are expected, timelines that you have in place, and the broad range of stakeholders engaged meaningfully, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Teresa. So I think a lot of us have been following this WSIS process for a number of years. And for those who are not as up to speed on some of the intricacies of UN processes, which I agree are very long and very complicated, in essence, what will be happening this year, at the end of the year, is that there will be the adoption of the WSIS+20 review. So this will be the second review that's conducted by the member states of the United Nations General Assembly of the outcome documents that Teresa had mentioned, the 2003-2005 Tunis and Geneva outcomes of the WSIS summits themselves. So the question here is, how will member states shape this eventual review to reflect some of the ongoing discussions that are happening around digital, both at the United Nations as well as other international forums? Will the WSIS action lines that have actually been established to implement the original WSIS outcomes still suffice to cover the breadth and the multitude of the global digital discussions and developments since then? And do the institutions and processes that were set up through the WSIS, such as the Internet Governance Forum that brings us all together today, still be maintained, updated, refined? Are they still fit for purpose? And how do the member states reflect on all the conversations that have taken place, the developments so far in the last 20 years? The process has been actually, as I mentioned, quite complex complex. There have been a number of UN agencies that have been involved in drafting Secretary General's reports. The ITU, the UNESCO colleagues have also had consultation processes that culminated in a number of submissions to the Secretariat itself. The Secretary General will be putting forward a report, the timing of which is a little bit unclear, that will summarize some of these ongoing conversations as an input for the consideration of the member states. And as some of you have already been involved in, there are ongoing consultations that have been held in forums such as the IGF, such as the Paris Summit, the Paris conference that was convened by UNESCO just a couple of weeks ago, and then in 2 weeks at the high-level WSIS event that is convened by ITU, UNDP, UNESCO, and UNCTAD, which is an annual forum where, again, we gather stakeholders to really talk about what we see as the progress made through WSIS and then the future going forward as well. There will be a number of occasions where it will be important to hear the stakeholder point of view, because part of the WSIS and the outcomes of the WSIS and the reason why the process endured so long and is so something that has really been able to carry through some of these outcome documents in very concrete ways is the commitment of the multi-stakeholder community and the network that has developed around the implementation of these aspects. So it is important that as stakeholders, we continue to be engaged in this process. And by saying this, I also include the UN system, because for us, we as UNDP see the WSIS action lines and the WSIS process as very important in translating guidance that is given by the member states into actionable outcomes that are focused on delivery to countries and to communities that we serve. So in the context of ongoing negotiations at the United Nations, the conclusion of the Global Digital Compact just last year, how then do we reflect these sort of developments into the WSIS action lines, into the WSIS review, reflecting on the fact that the principles that were agreed 20 years ago in Geneva and Tunis remain as relevant today as they were 20 years ago. So that's sort of the opening context where I really hope that stakeholders will continue to have conversations such as in the IGF and in other institutional forums to maintain the importance of the multi-stakeholder approach as embodied at the heart of WSIS itself.
Thank you. You really highlight the subject stakeholder and the multi-stakeholder dimension of all of this in the different subject areas. Thank you. Jarno, first of all, Finland, thank you so much for co-hosting this. And by example, also from government engagement in the process, what steps can governments take to ensure that really all regions, not just traditional actors, are meaningfully included in this WSIS+20 process?
I think governments like the one of Finland, so we are doing a lot together with different actors, organizations and mechanisms. And I think through the recent Global Digital Compact, the UN is better placed than ever to foster multi-stakeholder cooperation on digital matters and to leverage digital technologies for sustainable development. We believe that the GDC and WSIS are highly complementary and should be implemented in sync with each other. This is also to guarantee that everybody will be then on board. For us, the IGF is the primary multi-stakeholder forum for shaping international digital policy and internet governance at the UN level. A clear indication of its success are over 160 national, regional and youth initiatives of the IGF. It has also become an important platform for discussing emerging digital issues such as AI. And Finland, so we are of course strongly supporting the IGF. We have given financial support to the IGF throughout its existence, being one of the all-time top contributors, and we encourage, of course, other actors to step up their support to the IGF. In these geopolitical circumstances of today, I think it's even more important to support and enhance the multi-stakeholder model on internet governance, which in essence empowers the various stakeholders and enhances resilience of our common internet structure. And I think fragmentation of internet poses a danger to actualization of universal human rights, international trade and global geopolitical stability. But I think this thing, so how we can reach everybody and do good for everybody, is that we have to, of course, address the digital divide. And the majority of the world's population do not yet have meaningful and safe access to the internet, which requires urgent action. And bridging this digital divide is not only about affordable connectivity. It requires also investments in skills and competencies and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms online. And we want to develop new technologies and the internet by respecting democratic values and principles. Still, I think the WSIS 20 years review should highlight the need to focus on trusted connectivity and the free, open, global, interoperable, and secure internet. And the review is also an important opportunity to renew and strengthen the IGF mandate, including by ensuring a more sustainable financial basis from the regular UN budget that such as global inclusive effort deserves and needs. So to conclude, I think we are doing a lot.
Yeah, I would agree, and thank you for your observations of for an IGF, one needs sustainable budget, one needs to be able to bridge all stakeholders around the globe and be as inclusive. So I think those are important elements coming into the WSIS+20 aspect. Fiona, from your perspective, you've had quite a bit of experience in this as well. What areas and where is the input most needed before the WSIS+20 outcome is finalized? And how can we make sure that those inputs reflect a diverse global perspective that has already been touched upon by our first two speakers?
Thank you, Teresa, and thanks for the invitation and for the question. And I think it's important to keep in mind, Yuping kind of laid out a lot of the stuff that's going to be happening across the UN system this year, and it's a lot of activity. But at the end of the year in December, member states are going to adopt a resolution, and the resolution is going to, decide whether or not the IGF continues, and it's potentially going to update the WSIS action lines, and it's going to talk about the GDC. And a process has been kicked off. There's been co-facilitators appointed to kind of work with stakeholders and governments to kind of put the base documents together. And those co-facilitators have had some stakeholder consultations. They had a government consultation, which is broadcast on Web TV, or UN Web TV if you wanted to watch it. And then they also have issued an elements paper this past Friday that came out. And I think, there's a litany of issues, there's substantive issues that are going to be covered that are important to a wide range of civil society and non-government stakeholders, whether it's getting people connected, whether it's ensuring human rights online, whether it's dealing with AI and digital governance issues. But I think there's one issue set that I think people are sort of united around from the civil society perspective, and that's making sure that what I at least personally think is one of the biggest hallmark achievements of the WSIS process is opening up the conversation so that all stakeholders are considered. We saw last year, unfortunately, in the Global Digital Compact process, the GDC process, that the systems in New York are not nearly as open as UNDP or ITU or other expert agencies of the UN have become. They originally weren't 20 years ago either, right? And they've made a lot of effort to do that. And so I think the challenge that we have before us this year is to make sure that the process that's going to unfold this year has a real voice and gives real space for people to provide input into that process. And the two co-facilitators and the agenda they've laid out and the timeline and the schedule seems to be allowing that, which I think is a great outcome and a great improvement. There was a group of stakeholders originating in civil society and others that signed on that have submitted a couple of letters giving some very specific recommendations and suggestions for how to allow for that engagement. And so far, we're seeing positive movement in that, so I think that that's good. But we shouldn't take that for granted, and I think people should always be pushing to make sure that everyone's in the room and everyone has a say. I think conversations here at IGF are helpful. Conversations that are going to be happening at UNDP, that are going to be happening at ITU in a few weeks in Geneva. These are all going to be great things. But these conversations that the co-facilitators are going to lead, and actually having conversations that are not just people giving empty statements and actually seeing what they say and provide reflected in the documents and discussed are going to be an important next step. And I think that's what we want to make sure happens going forward for the rest of this year until we get to that final decision point where governments adopt a resolution in December.
This is a great setup for where the next question goes, and I can only echo that we've come a long way from 20 years ago. There was these kinds of panels, these kinds of discussions were not normal conversations that we would usually have. And so I think these opportunities of inclusivity of all stakeholders in subject areas has lended to some really core results, which brings us to the second section of this session about where WSIS outputs have shown an impact. We've talked about WSIS has produced different frameworks and dialogues and some tangible changes, including stakeholders at the table in discussions, discussing subject areas and providing factual subject expertise into different conversations. Which outputs, though, have been effective and which ones still need support is an important part of this conversation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Curtis, actually, about where have WSIS-related initiatives such as DNSSEC or internationalized domain names demonstrated lasting value, particularly for the underserved regions, and where are there still gaps? Where can we still do some work?
Thank you, Teresa. So I think you're right, as was mentioned, during the WSIS and IGF processes, there's been a lot of talk about where the internet has been or where there was development or gaps to be filled, such as security in the domain name system, universal access or reach, global reach and access. And DNSSEC is a very concrete success story. It was globally identified that there was weaknesses in the domain name system. These were addressed through work in the IETF to create the technical standards, capacity building, community building through the IGF. And the multi-stakeholder awareness raising, adaptation, and this wasn't developed by top-down mandates. This came from this realization from the technical communities, from the work here and elsewhere, really that this was a problem that needed to be addressed to create a reliability and trust in the system. And through persistent cooperation, engagement, and work, the technology was developed, the standard was set, and then the outreach and the work and the explanation of the value of this system was done. And the outcome is really measurable. We can see how, as DNSSEC has deployed, we can see there's a stronger authentication, a more secure DNS, and thereby a much more secure internet and global naming system that has a more robust foundation. And likewise, already in Tunis, we talked about the accessibility of the internet and global reach, and accessibility includes linguistic accessibility, and that includes in the DNS. We have seen this being evolved over the years and developed, again, standardization done throughout the IETF, but where we now today have a technical system in IDNs, and which covers the domain name system for non-Latin scripts, Arabic, Cyrillic, Chinese, other non-Latin scripts like Swedish, my native language. And we also see a lot of work being pushed over into the universal acceptance, that we go beyond the domain name system and we start talking about applications supporting these scripts in a way that we haven't had before. Technical standards has been done, we have them, and now the universal acceptance part is to get these adopted and really used in all the world's applications. Again, something that's been discussed and pushed through the awareness and awareness raising in the IGF sessions, in the WSIS context, about how important this is. We as ICANN have done a lot of work and outreach around this as well. And I think this showcased this last point a little bit about, Teresa asked about where there are still gaps. And the gap is not necessarily always about capability. We have the technical capability. It's about the alignment and ongoing alignment and work through that we build on these capabilities and make them accessible everywhere. And we continue to do the work on coordination through rolling out the DNSSEC around operators around the world. And we also see that where this cooperative effort fails or stagnates, that's when we start seeing fragmentation and which is a bad thing, and we see lack of progress. And I think WSIS+20 really needs to draw a clear distinction here, that the internet, actually these technical solutions work when they are supported by this long-term coordination that we have seen as part of the IGF, as part of the WSIS process. So the bottom line is really this, that the WSIS output so far has delivered a lot of positive examples of work when the multi-stakeholder model has put into practice and concrete action, and that WSIS+20 should really preserve and protect this, because this is what has been delivering. And I think if we start upsetting this, we risk seeing continued delivery, as we heard from the panels in the first section. We should really not try to bypass this, but build on what we have and continue this to ensure continued deployment.
Thank you. Thank you. And that does really tie into the first part of making sure we bridge into the South, use the technologies that we have and the awareness that we have that's already underway, and build on the momentum of the past 20 years forward and fast forward that. Lacina, if I could ask you with relation to Smart Africa, if you could share some practical examples of how Smart Africa has translated the WSIS goals into regional infrastructure or policy gains. And what insights does that afford us as we go into the WSIS+20 overall?
Thank you very much, Teresa, for the questions, and thank you for inviting Smart Africa. Smart Africa, a coalition of over 40 country African governments, partners, civil society, dedicated to transforming Africa into a single digital market. Together, we represent over 1.1 billion populations, united around just one vision: an integrated, sovereign, and inclusive digital Africa. Our mission is to convert WSIS commitments into a measurable progress. By saying that, over the past decade, we've drawn 3 core lessons. Number 1 is a continental ownership that creates leverage. With the direct endorsement from African head of the state, digital development has become a political imperative for all nations. Flagship priorities like a broadband strategy developed together with Senegal, digital identity developed together with the Benin, cybersecurity with the Côte d'Ivoire, cloud infrastructure and champions are championed nationally and regionally with a regional perspective, thereby reflecting a shift from a fragmented project to a shared continental ambition. Number 2, of what we actually drawn is the policy framework must deliver real result. Through initiatives like a Smart Africa Trust Alliance, which is a digital ID interoperability among nations, the Smart Africa Digital Academy, which is for capacity building, the Smart Africa Backbone, which actually calls every single country in Africa to be interconnected to at least 2 of its neighbors, and other relevant initiatives, we have moved from policy ideas to operational pilots and regional implementation. These are not just a future aspiration, they are a working model. Number 3, and the last one, is the multi-stakeholder cooperation. It works if it's rooted in African need. Our digital scholarship funds created back in 2018. Today, we've actually trained more than 90 students in a master's degree in the digital transformation, different universities in Africa. And our data governance framework, which is actually running in Senegal and Ghana and so forth, and our harmonized regulatory blueprints are developed not just with the government, but also civil society, academia, and private sector, both African and global. So, WSIS give us the vision. Smart Africa is building the bridge. Thank you.
That's so well articulated, I have to say, between the continental ownership, the ambition, but also importantly taking policy and how does one operationalize that in a way that's rooted in the local community needs, which are very distinct from different communities to each other. So we're going to run a little experiment here. We're going to see how this works. It did work. We have a slide up. Fantastic. So much of this work has involved contributions across different sectors, including the private sector. And what we'd like to do is just get a quick read from the room, including the Zoom attendees. Which WSIS-related initiatives do you think need greater support today? So from the audience, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. And Becky, I think you're going to work magic in the Zoom room. Is that right? Something to that effect?
Yes, the poll's up in the Zoom room, so
okay.
I'll let you know.
So for the first question, the IGF, so the question is, does it need greater support? So first one, the IGF as a globally accessible platform for dialogue. Is that a yes? Okay. Sense of the room? Very good. Okay. Excellent.
And online, so far, that has 8%. In the Zoom room, that one has 8%.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, very good. Let's keep track of this. Okay. For the second one, digital capacity building in under-resourced regions.
This one just pulled ahead at 41%.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you. Open technical standards and cross-border interoperability. Okay, it's a little less. Okay, maybe because it's working better than it was.
And 0% for online, so.
0%. Okay, that's interesting. So I wonder whether 20 years ago that might have been a different result. Maybe it's a demonstration of how things have evolved over time. Universal acceptance, including support for multilingual internet infrastructure. Okay. Yes, a bit, yes. Very good.
And actually online, this is our second runner-up at 35%.
Oh my gosh, okay, very good. And for the last one, cybersecurity collaboration through multi-stakeholder approaches. Okay, very good.
12%.
12%.
Oh, 16 now.
16%. Okay. Okay. That's very interesting. Some of the areas 20 years ago or 15 or 10 years ago might have had a different sector, but it certainly does show where greater support is needed today, and also the cross-sectorial and the regional aspects that we want to take a look at. Fantastic. Okay. So going into the next section here, we're going to focus in on what can still be done before December. Now, December being when we look at the negotiations in New York and the conversations that will be happening, which will hopefully be as inclusive as possible. But what work do we need to undertake in order to demonstrate the value of what needs to be done next? So with that, how can government, civil society, and the technical community really help shape that? And Jonna, I'm going to turn to you first for this. What are some of the most critical inputs or messages that government should be prioritizing now, particularly from those regions that have not traditionally been represented in these global internet policy discussions? And you touched on that earlier in your remarks, and we've certainly heard about it from the others.
Yeah, I think we have to focus there on the opportunities and try to give also the positive messages. And I think there are so many things that are quite obvious for us, but still we should try to keep on repeating them. For example, as we know, so digitalization accelerates progress towards the sustainable development goals. Digitalization is also a way and a means to strengthen the economy, mobilize domestic resources, increase private investments, improve citizens' welfare, and increase gender equality. And also I think that digitalization has proven also to accelerate the clean transition. But still, I mean, we also have to talk about the other side of the things. So coming back to the topic of this digital divide. Mm-hmm. So it remains a wide concern, and there are 2.6 billion people lacking access and significant disparities within and between nations. And the gender gap remains a significant concern, hindering women's position in the digital economy. And for Finland, that is one of the top priorities, and in this sense, what we are trying to work with different organizations. And I think addressing the current digital divide will help us to get back on the track also when it comes to Agenda 2030 and the majority of SDG targets. And globally, of course, we are still quite far from reaching the target of universal connectivity as set out by the Agenda 2030. And at the national level, especially in developing countries, significant gaps remain between urban and rural areas. And as I said already, the gender digital divide is still wide. I think strong focus on trusted connectivity and the free, open global interoperable, stable and secure internet, as well as multi-stakeholder internet governance underpinning this are essential in the review, and they are important messages. In the this action lines, the perspectives related to new technologies that are essential for the development of the information society should be also considered more comprehensively than before. And this includes such technologies as AI, high-performance computing, quantum technology, semiconductor technology, mobile networks, and photophonics, for example. So quite a number of items still on the table.
A lot of items and new subject areas as well. So thank you. That's very helpful. Fiona, from your perspective, in light also what we've heard from a government perspective, what advice would you offer to smaller or under-resourced organizations aiming to participate? And in that, how might they also liaise with some of their governments in relation to helping inform those conversations?
Sure, I think it's a good question. And also I wanted to comment on the poll because I was struck actually, I think if I read the results correctly, that the capacity building one might have been the highest, got the strongest online and in the room vote. And I found that really interesting because my recollection is the original idea for WSIS came from a 1998 ITU plenipot resolution, and development and connectivity was the basis of that resolution. It was the basis of calling for the summit in the New York process, and it undergirds the entire 5 years of the WSIS process. So I think it's great that continues, and I think it's important that we keep that in mind, that at the end of the day, I know, having been a former government official, we can spend a lot of time arguing about words in a room. But at the end of the day, this is about getting people connected and getting people to do the things that you're doing and to do that. So I found the poll really interesting, actually. It was kind of cool. But to answer your specific question, I think, as I said, the process that's unfolding throughout the rest of the calendar year, the co-facilitators so far have been making great efforts to give people the space to have a say. So they had a stakeholder session. They had this elements paper they put out. The comments for that are due July 15th. I cannot believe that something has happened so quickly in the UN system. But I think when I listened to the government stakeholder session, there was a proposal made from the EU that was originally a Swiss proposal for the creation of an informal multi-stakeholder feedback group of some kind. I'll get the exact name wrong. And that was just a few weeks ago, and they've already announced they're doing it. I literally have never seen something happen that fast. So that means that there's going to be a group of stakeholders that the co-facilitators are going to run things past, I guess, and get input from. So once that group gets announced, I would also encourage people to find the people in your stakeholder group that are on that, because I think talking to those people can be helpful. Also talking to your individual government back at home to understand what they're doing and how they're going to participate and how you can inform their process is equally as important. But I am more optimistic than I was last year. That it looks like in this year's process, there's going to be opportunities for you to provide your own input, whether it's online or whether it's through written submissions or whether it's through working with like-minded groups and doing others. So I would encourage everyone to take advantage of that and keep pushing for more, because if you don't push, it doesn't happen. So don't accept the status quo and push for more, but you have to show up. And you have to actually show up and participate. So I would encourage everyone that cares about these issues to take advantage and to do that. And to do that at all the events that are going to unfold over the course of the year.
It's a really good point, not to take it for granted. It took a lot of work by a lot of governments and a lot of stakeholders to get to this point. So take advantage and don't miss these opportunities, and let's keep that going. Lucina, as we approach the final phase of the WSIS+20 review and what's most pressing with regards to infrastructure policy gaps that should still be addressed, particularly from your perspective and from the regional development and digital development and coordination in Africa, you touched on some really core operational aspects in your introductory remarks, so we'd love to hear a little bit more around that.
Thank you very much, Teresa. The WSIS+20, if I need to really look at the most pressing regional infrastructure and policy gap that the WSIS+20 should be addressing, first of all, if I had to rewind the tape back in 1999, before when the WSIS was being created, when they talk about connectivity, I would have said meaningful connectivity, because the connectivity led us to affordability challenge as well in Africa. So the WSIS+20 really must address 4 persistent gaps that constrain Africa's digital future, which is meaningful connectivity, regulations, skills, and sovereignty. I'll start with a meaningful connectivity. Too many African countries still depend on external route for local internet traffic. We must complete the regional backbone, increase IXPs, very important, and reinforce initiatives like the Smart Africa backbone that call every single country to be connected at least 2 of its neighbors, and as well as the One Africa network. Not only that, we must focus also on affordability, because today, if you look at the usage gap today in Africa, is over 40%, which means the infrastructure of telecommunication is available, but people are not using it for 4 reasons. 1, affordability. 2, local context. 3, capacity building, because they don't really understand. 4, cyber hygiene. So I'm going to move to number 2, regulatory harmonization. Africa has over 50 digital law, but little interoperability. And I was very surprised in the poll, we had a very few, like a 10% only, about interoperability. So investors and the innovators, they need clarity. No one's like unpredictability. So the WSIS+20 should champion continental legal convergence through agile, right-based framework aligned with Africa's internet governance blueprint. Number 3, capacity and inclusion. Less than 10% of adults in several countries in Africa possess basic digital skills. And now it's not enough to be digitally savvy, but you could also be AI ignorant. That's the reality. Absolutely, you could be a PhD, but if you're not adapted to AI, we have another gap. So AI gap. So through Smart Africa Digital Academy and the Smart Africa Scholarship Funds, we are investing in both grassroots literacy and high-level technical training, including AI, cybersecurity, and quantum readiness. Number 4, and the last one, which is a sovereignty and institutional coordination. Africa must govern its data, digital assets. Initiatives like a Smart Africa Trust Alliance and the Council of Africa Internet Governance Authority, KAIGA, that we are putting together, are essential to asserting regional leadership and ensuring that the global governance reflects African reality. WSIS+20 must not only review past gaps, but equip regions like Africa to co-lead the next decade of digital governance, inclusive, secure, and sovereign. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love your 4 very concrete areas. That's really very thoughtful and also a good way to go into the conversations. Curtis, what contributions should the technical community bring forward, whether through data case studies or coordination examples, to ensure that the WSIS+20 outcome reflects how the internet actually works?
So, we often talk about the IGF and the WSIS+20 and what has been achieved, and hidden that, I think we forget quite a bit of what actually has been achieved, all these success stories, and I think maybe to what my colleagues here just referred to about the poll and this the lack of engagement in the need for global standards. Maybe we've just been a little bit too successful, because the internet has been a phenomenal success because it's built on the existing global standards that have been produced through multi-stakeholder processes, and we're taking it for granted. And I think that's a success story that maybe we should talk more about, is that the reason you can do that is exactly because of the global interoperable standards that enables this. And the flip side of that is that it also makes us to a large extent forget what happens when the opposite occurs, when we see fragmentation, and we see how we devalue the access to the internet, but having that fragmentation by having silos, which is something that we actually built away from. Where I'm old enough to have been here before that, and then what we saw before that, and when we had the silos, and the internet unified this and created a much more valuable network for everyone that allowed all this digital economy to flourish, built upon these standards. And I think that we also forget about what the work in the multi-stakeholder model and WSIS+20 outcomes have operationally meant in what we have deployed with this. We talked about the underserved regions, and we have seen a lot of build-out with IXPs, as the Director General mentioned. Africa has seen a phenomenal explosion in IXPs in the last 20 years. That doesn't mean there's more to be done, but we have also come quite a far way, and the rest of the world as well. We have seen root server instances. One of the things we talked about in the early IGFs was how do we build a more resilient and better infrastructure in underserved regions, and in doing so, we have deployed literally thousands of root server instances around the world to make sure that the internet is stable, better, more secure in those regions. ICANN is one of these operators, and there is today almost 2,000 of these instances around the world. We operate 240 of them in 70 countries, and we can show how this has improved performance. Where we saw, for example, one of the data points we have is in how when we deployed this in Egypt, how traffic became much more localized. The same that we have seen as IXPs has been deployed. We see traffic becoming localized, both for benefit of resilience and security of the network, but also for improved user performance and again stimulating the local economy. And for all of the G77 countries, and also for any other country, by the way, this infrastructure really matters, and that's this has been a showcase of what we have established so far. As we heard, there's more that can be done, but we tend to forget what we have also achieved. This has really improved how the internet works. As I mentioned before, the multilingual support and universal access work has come a very far way. Again, there's much more to do, but this has come out. We should celebrate these success stories and actually highlight this, what we have done. We, at ICANN, together with Internet Society, produced the footprints of the 20 years of the IGF, which is a paper that really summarizes all this achievement that the technical community, that WSIS has delivered over these years. And I think that we have maybe not done enough of reflecting on our own successes and talk about this. And saying that, I also think what we should bring with us in this and for the forward is that language matters, and having clarity in language is very important. We hear talk about sovereignty or control, which are two words that can mean very different things to different people. If I hear them, or someone hears them, they might believe we're talking. Well, they probably believe that we're talking about fragmentation. Others, this might be words that have other meanings. But we have to be clear on what is we're trying to achieve, what was the ultimate goal, and what are the risks, and we break this. The technical community has, since before IGF, in the early WSIS process, been engaged to provide the input and safeguards to explain what the consequences are of decisions, to ensure that we can prevent a breakage or siloing or fragmentation of exactly the internet values that really create this value creation and provided all this economic growth over the last 20 years. And we really need to reinforce this success record and showcase that it is these fundamental principles that the technical community have highlighted, safeguarded, and provided the understanding of over 20 years that is at the core of this and continues to provide the value. And we need to continue to make these points all between now and December, and really reiterate how important these are for the success of the internet in the future, just like it's been for the past 20 years.
Thank you. I think those are some really concrete examples of where we can actually share those stories. Yuping, I know that you had wanted to also offer your thoughts for this, so please go ahead.
I asked Teresa to give me the floor because I'm going to take off my UNDP hat and sort of say this as a former diplomat at the UN hat. I think there's a big gap, and forgive me all the other MFA diplomats in the room that are from New York. There's a big gap between the New York community and those of us gathered in the room that have been working on these issues for a long time. There's a tendency when you put resolutions to the General Assembly to oversimplify, to stick in compromise language where you don't really understand the implications of what the language means, and then to really put a political context on terms that are otherwise accepted or actually understood by the technical community. So for instance, Curtis mentioned sovereignty and control. In the UN context, that has a very loaded meaning, and even the use of those terms would actually be debated, and some shadow seen into the use of that terminology that could then have implications in terms of the negotiations. So my appeal to all of the stakeholders that are really engaging in this conversation, and I really applaud the fact that there have been so many good, concrete ideas that we are all united behind in bringing forward to the WSIS review, is to keep it clear, simple, actionable when it comes to the UN processes, to word it in language that diplomats are already using so that they understand certain things. So the reason why, for instance, capacity building drew such a high vote is because that is the language that is now pervasive in the UN when it comes to sustainable development and really equipping countries of the global majority to have that kind of ability. So really, I think the way we're starting to frame this conversation into what appeals to the countries of the world in a united collective effort around digital versus sort of taking an approach that might be seen as a little bit more divisive is very important. I would also say that there seems to be a tendency to write off the WSIS as being dusty, out of date, that we have new developments now that must supersede the WSIS. But precisely as Fiona said, the fact that we're still here talking about capacity building 20 years on is a testament to how enduring these principles are. And what I think we need to make clear is that in the next 20 years going forward, these foundations remain as valid as in the past, today, and going forward as well. The last thing I would say, and this way I put back on my UN agency hat and say that a lot of you are aware of the conversations around the UN system, where it's a very difficult time for all of us. And in this moment of difficulty, I think the greater guidance you can give to the system to double down on what has worked, to focus on delivery and impact, particularly for the communities that we serve, is important. And so that would be my ask to you as UN agencies. So for instance, very concretely, sort of following my own recommendation to be clear and simple, in the elements paper that the WSIS co-facilitators have put forward, there is no reference to the high-level segment of the WSIS forum that's occurring very soon in a couple of weeks. That, to us, UN agencies, ITU, UNDP, UNESCO, UNCTAD, has been a cornerstone of the success of the WSIS action lines. So we would ask that this be reflected again in the WSIS review, in the elements paper as well. So very concrete recommendations to how the UN system should continue implementing these areas of work and the guidance from member states will be particularly important.
Thank you so much. That almost led into the closing part, but I don't want to skip the opportunity to open it very briefly if there's any questions from the audience. And Becky, I don't know if you have anybody in the Zoom room or anybody wants to have a question or their own observations about what would be useful. No? Okay. Should I jump to the closing?
Yeah, we can jump to closing.
Okay. So we're not closing yet. We're not letting our panelists loose, but Yuping had sort of kicked it off a little bit. But I'm going to ask each panelist to offer one specific step their community should take to help shape a globally useful outcome of the WSIS+20. Now, by useful, it could be anything practical, pragmatic, anything that they think is useful. We've already heard conversations not in New York are often different than conversations outside of New York. So those are some examples, practical solutions. But to the panelists, for the audience, if you want them to walk away with one action and one thing, what would it be? And so, Jana, I'm going to turn to you first from a government perspective.
Well, obviously I have to focus on the political aspects then. So.
Of course, yes.
I think a major challenge in this process is how to maintain digital development inclusive from the regional level to the global level, and as well as to maintain the development orientation of technology and its focus on human rights also. And this is a key challenge which all stakeholders need to address.
Thank you. So I hope everybody heard that and wrote it down. Fiona, over to you. What would you take as an action for everybody?
Sure. I mean, there's lots of different things we could all point to, but if I'm looking for one very specific thing, I think I would say to people in different stakeholder groups that they should continue to demand their seat at the table, but that means you have to actually show up when you get the seat. And I think that we've seen some progress this year, probably still not enough, but some small steps. So we should acknowledge that, and we should show up, and we should take advantage of it, and we should continue to push to see the really, truly multi-stakeholder environment that we want to see.
Thank you. Curtis, from the technical side.
So I think the technical community really must continue to contribute evidence, tangible implementation, coordination outcomes, and data that shows what has worked. That's really our responsibility to bring to the table. And This can't happen in isolation, as you just heard. The governments and civil society needs to bring their inputs forward, rooted in the experiences and not just declarations, to bring these tangible examples of what works. And I think WSIS+20 will only succeed if the outcomes reflect the systems that are already making the internet works. And we don't need new structures. We need continued collaboration and a clear commitment to the model that has actually delivered.
Thank you. I think those are really, we need to show that very carefully. Yuping, you shared some observations, but I suspect you might have some more.
This is the tricky moment for me because on behalf of the UN system, we have to reiterate the fact that we are guided by the member states. And so just looking to the member states and then, but also asking that the member states listen to the stakeholder community. Because again, I've said this, I think, in a number of discussions before. Multi-stakeholderism is not natural to the UN system itself. It is a multilateral organization, but multi-stakeholderism, the way it's been developed in 20 years and the way we do discussions here at the IGF is not the way how New York does things, and perhaps New York needs to adapt to that. But exactly as Fiona says, showing up, saying this, and demanding that amount of accountability for this over and over again is how we make the changes. So again, truly, the fact that we now have these changes in the way the WSIS co-facilitators are approaching multi-stakeholderism is a testament to the fact that many of people have showed up through the GDC process and now are showing up more and more than ever before.
Thank you. And Lucina, from your perspective.
From my perspective, multipolarity is a geopolitical fact of our time, undeniable and irreversible, but multilateralism is a choice. It is the conscious decisions to cooperate across divide, to build trust among ourselves, and to shape a fairer global order, not despite our differences, but because of them.
It's very well said. Thank you. Thank you. Not only is the light flashing red, so I am being told it needs to sort of call it a wrap, but we've heard a wide range of perspectives and observations of what has been transformative over the past 20 years, but also where we have gaps and where we need to go. The question we were going to pose to you, or comments to seek, would be what would help you and your organization in WSIS+20 before December. So I would ask that you walk away from this conversation thinking about that. Encourage you to sign up for different things to help inform or get materials. For example, we have a WSIS+20 outreach mailing list with updates. Everybody's sharing different information. There's also other dialogues happening. Engage in those. Provide your input and provide your data. And as has been reiterated here, the process is open. Take those opportunities and engage and participate. Share your stories, share your observations where you've seen pragmatic results, but also where there's gaps and where we can work to improve things. So with that, I would thank everybody for joining and participating, and let's make the WSIS+20 a successful conversation and outcome. So thank you, everybody.